Order. Is there a motion on the agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda for the city council work meeting.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none to motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. So our third item on the agenda is a joint meeting with the Parks Commission, who is still in session from their previous meeting tonight. Jack, would you like to?
Thank you, Steve. We welcome the Parks Commission. This meeting was scheduled to make sure that there's good communication back and forth between the council and the commissions and to work together to establish priorities and goals for parks projects and then base our capital improvements plans on those priorities. I've had some discussion with some of the parks members and some of the council members. We thought this would be a good way to just answer any questions each group may have so that we're on the same page when we develop our capital improvements plans. Nate has the current plan that we're working off of, that the Parks Commission will start on. I met with the Parks Commission last March and we discussed some means of priorities with our parks. I think at that time we kind of reached a consensus that we need to try to concentrate the majority of our investments for most of our improvements in our most used parks. That's not to neglect the existing ones that we have, but to concentrate those on where the most use is and develop these capital improvements plans to reflect those priorities. So in talking with and receiving some input from some of the Parks Commission members, they felt it'd be a good idea to sit down and talk to council to see what we were looking for in terms of what was being recommended from the Parks Commission to achieve these goals. So with that, I'll let Nate address some of the comments that he's heard from the Parks Commission and then let the Parks Commission members address any concerns that they have with City Council.
So the plan, the budget we have up here on the screen is the one that was approved with last year's budget for 2020 and 2024. This was approved kind of around the same time we had a meeting with the residents of Northland Manor Park. And after meeting with that park, I think Randy and Tim, you guys were at that meeting. It sounded like a lot of the things we had planned there, the residents really didn't want there, so it's kind of going to change a big chunk of our plan that we have here. One of the items we had was a pavilion there planned for this year. They had talked, the city council, I know has talked about this as well, the idea of a dog park somewhere in East Bethel. At that time, it seemed like the residents of Northland Manor were not in favor of that at their neighborhood park. So if it's something they need to look for another park for that, or a different location that could be addressed. Also, we had a plan for a fence and irrigation at that park as well as a trail. So it's going to change a lot of the items we have on here. Is there anything specific that the Park Commission wants to address?
Can we ask a question first?
Yeah.
This table is different than what we have in our packet. So what is this table?
There's two separate ones. This is the one that came.
Neither of the tables.
Neither tables match up.
Is
with
They don't
this.
match, and they don't match what got mailed to me either, so I'm confused.
Well, let me see. This is the one that came right out of our budget.
Here's you want.
I know we had a whole bunch of different.
Do you want these?
No, I've got it here somewhere.
A whole bunch of different, this thing went through about 4 different changes at the end of the year there. Let me pull up our budget real quick.
I mean, it seems like the items are the same, but they're
Moved around.
juggled around.
Let me pull the one up that was in the packet, Nate.
This is the 2020 adopted budget here. Doesn't have the colors, but it's the same items.
So then is the one in our packet,
That might have been a different.
the previous one before the changes were made?
That could be. The one that I gave the park commission came right out of the city budget.
So we should be just looking at this and not.
This is the one that the city council adopted here for the budget.
Okay, so we have an incorrect tables in our packet. So
That's not right, Jack?
Chuck's looking at it, so.
Yeah, the one in the packet doesn't match this one.
Right, we know that.
But the
It's just-
question is, which one is correct?
The one that's correct would be the one that was adopted in the budget, the one that's
Okay.
on the
All right.
Park commission have any questions or comments you want to give?
I think, based on some of the comments and planning that we've had, I think clarity between the idea of regional parks and neighborhood parks. You know, we took a couple of the higher used parks and kind of called them regional parks. How we can help prioritize that, is one thing. The other piece is in the planning, how much flexibility can we have in this? As far as, you know, current year and next year should be very much static, not gonna change. But years after that, you know, how much flexibility can we have in that? Or can we change the way we talk about this? I guess those are, clarity around that, to me, would help us better plan.
I think one of the questions from the council was that question of flexibility and why there was, I won't say lack of consistency, but there wasn't, it didn't look like there was some clear stuff. We were changing things almost on an annual basis. I know some of that is done to reflect changes in needs, but I think we want to talk a little bit more about developing something and being able to say, okay, this year we do this in this park. Here's the plan to finish it. Again, though, we would recognize there is a need to retain some flexibility because certain things change. Primarily what we pointed out with the meeting in Northland Manor, that's gonna change our approach maybe for developing the projects and the plans for approval for 2021.
We had kind of taken Northland Park with the development over there with Shaw, looking at it, going, okay, this park's gonna get a lot more use over the next couple of years. Let's get it updated to reflect more, to be more like it was earlier. Because we felt that that park was gonna get a lot more use. We get that trail segment in there from the Shaw development into that park. You know, and some of the other things that are going on, we felt that there was gonna be a lot more use there. And there still might be, and the residents around Northland Manor had a real negative vibe as far as what they wanted done over there. But I think with more use, we're still gonna have to do something.
And to your point, Tim, that's part of the discussion that we had is because of the higher density development in that area, that seemed like a logical place to concentrate some improvements. Again, though, those weren't received well by the residents of that area, so that's a balancing act that we're gonna have to take a look at.
Did they say what they did want?
Yeah, nothing.
They just wanted a trail, didn't they, Tim? They wanted a trail, and that was about it. They didn't want the pavilion, they didn't want the dog park, and they didn't want a fence around the ball field, so,
Or the irrigation?
yeah.
They didn't feel that the ball field got enough use to warrant irrigation or fencing. They felt that a pavilion would be, wasted money because there's not the use in that park. And they very definitely did not want a dog park. They made that part of their more than once during the park. And the trail that they were interested in was more around the south side of the park, not connecting to the Shaw development. Correct. More into the dog park. It was more of a place where they could walk through the woods on the south side of the
Makes sense.
So Northland Park is located over here in kind of the southwest corner of the city. Our staff did go in there last fall and cut some trails in for the walking trail. It's pretty, the soils are pretty muddy in there. It's gonna take a little work to make it so that, and when it's real wet conditions, it's probably not gonna be passable. It's a lot, the soils are a lot worse in there once we got in there than we originally thought.
Getting any use.
We just cut it right before it starts snowing, so. This is our park comp plan map too. This large green area encompasses a good portion of the southern part of the city. We do not have any parks or facilities in this entire area. It's something that the Park Commission has looked at in the future if we do get some development, rather than take park dedication fees. It might be an area to look at to get some land and develop a park in this area. They had some residents come in and talk to the Park Commission saying that they live in this area and there's a long ways to go to get to a park, so that's kind of how this was developed. This was from 2018. But it shows all of our trails, our parks. Some of these are proposed trails, along with what the Nook County has planned for a regional trail. At some point, they have a regional trail planned across the northern part of the city here. And trails has been a big item that we see from people coming in. It's probably the number one thing we've heard over and over is trails. So we're trying to address that. We have a hard time putting trails in where people are already living.
I think you're gonna have that problem every time.
And we've got short segments, we just need to connect them up.
Well, even the short segments, I mean, your neighborhood, we tried that before and had a hard time.
I think one going down to town right now is no problem going down to town. They don't wanna go back through the neighborhood.
I'm sorry?
Well, they don't wanna go back through, you got that, Nate?
Yeah,
There's some right of way back in through off of.
Right, but that was only certain families that
True.
were, it wasn't the
And they
majority of
don't live
it.
there.
Correct.
so Booster Park is here. At one time, there was a trail plan that would come down Baton and cut down through the neighborhood through here. The city does own an easement that connects this neighborhood to this neighborhood, so you'd be able to get to the city park without going on a major road, but the neighborhood was not in favor of it at that time. We do have a trail segment started through here, and we're gonna finish this last chunk hopefully this spring and summer.
But the city still owns that right of way through that neighborhood.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's also been easements provided all the way along the town. Previously, when we tried to get a trail along there, I believe those easements are still in effect.
I believe, Jack, yeah, all those easements are in
No,
place.
those were recorded back in 2010, so.
And actually, that segment, the only thing we were missing for an easement is the spot that's actually got a trail on now. So.
Actually, there is easement on there. There's easement on that first lot at 226th and Baton going north. And then there's easement left over from the Prairie Pine subdivision that connects to that.
Do we still have the, okay with Cedar Creek to run the trail along 229?
You know, we haven't had any discussions with them probably in 8 or 9 years on that. I'm sure if the opportunity became available that we could open that discussion, I'm sure they'd be receptive to it.
And with this new Elevage property, there's all kinds of trails that are gonna be going in with that. We do have the trail and biking preserve that went in with that development, so that's a good way to address adding trails is tackling it with the development that takes place.
Best time to do it.
So what was their plan for 2020, Jack? You go back to what they're gonna, they took Northern Manor out of there, and then what?
So right now, we don't have anything planned in the park acquisition and development fund. This will have to get pulled.
Can you
Okay.
make that bigger? Thanks.
So you're looking for something for 2020 then?
Well, we have money available for this year. It would have to be,
Well, would that be something to look into then, that trail coming in off Baton, or?
that's already been
That's already-
budgeted for, yeah.
Oh, that has, okay.
That was actually 2019, it's carrying over till 2020.
Okay, okay.
Two hundred and twenty-sixth.
To
Yeah.
226th, yeah.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go further, that's a good point.
See that go all the way down? You know, that's a scary road to walk on.
Well, and that's one of the roads that gets brought up when we're at town hall meetings, that people want to be able to ride their bikes all the way down Baton
Right.
without having to
Yeah.
zigzag through.
And now that it's asphalt, it's become a super highway.
But that's not gonna, the $40,000 that was scheduled for Northland wouldn't cover that extension of the
Not even
trail,
close.
right?
Not even close. Probably 3 times that.
It's a pretty long run to get all the way down to 226th. Luckily, it's pretty, there's only one spot with some wetland issues. Once you get down there, it's pretty decent ground all the way through there.
And there's one spot where we need a retaining wall,
Yeah.
and the rest is pretty much flat.
So how much would you need to do that trail? What are you
Do you
thinking?
remember what the total cost
To
was?
finish it?
It's approximately a half a mile from 226 down to 222nd Lane, so
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look it up.
I agree with what Tim says is a pretty good budget number, probably 100 to 120,000. There would be one section of wetlands to deal with, and there would be a retaining wall in one section, but that should be more than enough to cover that, but.
So basically, for the next 3 years, if you were to take out the pavilion, the dog park, and the fence and irrigation of Northland Manor, that would be enough money then to finish that trail.
Yeah, it would be pretty close.
And what if we skip the trail and Booster West because we got the Booster Trail already around the pond?
That was to be a continuation of the pond trail.
I understand, but there's already one there, and to me, Baton sounds more important.
We might be able to fund both of those. So this is just the park acquisition development, and these revenues are projected. They're based on development. So in the past, this is, a lot of years, this has been zero. We didn't have any development. Now, things are going a lot better. It could be quite a bit more than this, too, as things take off down in the utility district.
That's what I say, if you're gonna develop that east side, now there's gonna be more park dedication fees coming in there, and so.
So we also have the Park Capital Fund.
I mean, I'm not suggesting that we ignore Northland, I'm just saying that, you know, if you're looking for the money, that would probably cover it.
This budget will be starting off, after we pay for that trail segment, probably about $30,000 over what was projected here, so we will have a little extra money in here too to help cover some of those costs.
Where was the trail that was going from Northland Manor over to across the bog, across the creek?
That was 2019 budget, right?
2019, yeah. We had 50,000 budgeted for that. We did get the trail easement, so it's all set up. It's just a matter of, it might be a lot.
So that's another $50,000 that we haven't used yet, that you have available, that's not included in your current budget?
Yep, I'm adding that onto here.
So
So we had,
depending upon the answer that you get back, you know, as to whether you have to put in a boardwalk, that might also make a difference, would it not? Because you've got the money available now, unless you're gonna save it until you can get enough money for the boardwalk.
yep, That's, we have to decide if we wanna do that or
And we don't have the estimate on boardwalk yet.
no. And the ditch crossing's gonna be expensive too. It says Crooked Brook Crossing.
I agree too, I don't think we wanna ignore Northland Manor, but it's kind of the chicken and the egg thing. The residents really don't want a whole lot done there. But as it gets more usage, you're gonna have to.
I don't disagree with you, and I also think that it's, that while it is important that we listen to what the local residents want for that park, I think we also have to realize, like we were talking about, that it is a regional park that you kind of want to designate it as, and it's gonna be for more than just the people in that neighborhood, and so therefore, you know, while they may not want to have the pavilion, maybe it's something that we do anyway. Again, I think we should be, you know, very receptive to what the neighborhood wants, or specifically what they don't want. Because again, like you had mentioned, they were very adamant about the dog park, and you know, again, we had discussions about the reasons for that. And, you know, some of them were valid, and some of them, I think, were kind of an exaggeration myself. However, I think that it is important that, like you say, we don't ignore Northland Manor. We may have to decide to do something other than what we were currently planning. I'm kind of getting back to, you know, kind of the overall budget plan as a development and an idea. I mean, personally, I would like to, you know, and I understand that, you know, something happens and it's, okay, it's time to change. But, and I realize that parks are very much sometimes a moving target. But I think, you know, when we're talking about budgeting for different items for parks, it almost be kind of nice, the same thing that, you know, like we're planning for, you know, our maintenance facilities, when we're, you know, having to buy an extra vehicle or something else, that when it does come time that, you know, we're not just kind of moving things around all the time, that we actually have a plan going forward that remains static unless there kind of is that kind of emergency that needs to happen. Again, I realize that we're kind of throwing this whole thing into a jumble just because we're talking about this one trail, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. I think maybe we should. But it would be nice to get some stability to our planning.
And I think that's what drove a lot of the council decision on that, was that having that component of long-range planning within the CIP, you know. As example, you know, some of the frustration comes when that is juggled around, is Highway 65. Highway 65 was supposed to be completely repaved this year. Then it went to 1, and then it went to 22, now it's to 20, or now it's, you know, 4 years out. And so some of these things, you know, in this case, you know, that case, it wasn't budgeting, it was just expectation and planning, and how it affects other things. And I think having that little bit of consistency from year to year, and if there are changes, you know, particularly when it comes to councils, is for us to understand why things are changing.
Are you asking why, what, if they're changing in our plan all the time? Is that what you're asking?
The change, if I remember meeting right, we looked at years past, what the CIP was in years past, and everything seemed to juggle around a little bit.
Well, you know, we have things trying to come up with what we're gonna do because people change their minds all the time. Some of the stuff we've already mentioned here, it's like, we never can count on money being in the budget. That one year we had to spend that money on machinery that came out of our budget, so biggest thing that we'd like to see done is trail. So if we could come up with a plan on trying to get at least one of them done, I think that would be great. You know, finally finish something.
And I think, I mean, from that, from the trails perspective, I think council's in full support of that. I mean, we've had discussions in the past of, you know, that's what we seem to hear from the community as well. And in some respects, they're easier to construct and get done. But the challenge is, like you've seen in the past, is you know, it's kind of not, we love the trails, but don't put them through our neighborhood. And I've had discussions with a couple of members over the past years. It's like, it's gonna happen every time. And you know, sometimes things aren't easy, you know. But that's not necessarily a reason not to do things too. Part, you know, respecting the fact, and it's glad that we get community feedback on the parks. But also, you know, as a city, we need to look at broader picture as well. And that's where the idea of regional parks, you know, comes in. Guarantee it, you know, if Booster Park would have been surrounded with homes back when Booster Park was first developed, no one may not have wanted it. You know, that's just the kind of thing that happens, you know, and it's you know, I don't think we're gonna be citing any new parks necessarily, but you know, that's the challenge that we have to deal with.
Well, I think too that you know, your comment is very, very apropos about the point of listening to residents and what they want to have in their neighborhood, in their parks. But I think what we have to remember too is that, you know, that literally can change from month to month, year to year. So literally you could have, you know, people come in and say, okay, I want a petition to have some playground equipment in Northland Manor. Well, you put it into the budget because you can't do it right away, and then it's on the plan for, say, 3 years out. 2 years go by, and then all of a sudden, you know, you get another group of people that walk in the door and say, I don't understand why we're putting this here. You know, there's no kids in our neighborhood. And, you know, the original people who wanted to have that playground equipment aren't coming in before you at the same time and saying, no, wait a minute, we wanted to have that. And, you know, so that's where I think, you know, sometimes even though you may have some people come in and say, we do or don't want this, you still have to kind of place a priority on what it is that we're talking about doing, and maybe either go ahead with something right away, or even tell somebody that, you know, when they want something, it's, look, you know, we're planned out for 3 to 4 years. That's when we're going to be able to put your project on the list. Because otherwise, you know, we may end up doing this year after year after year, just depending upon who walks in the door of that particular meeting and says, hey, I would like to have, you know, this project done, or I don't want this project done.
The playgrounds that we're putting in, you know, the last couple we put in, what's the average life expectancy of those? Do the manufacturers give you one, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years?
Yeah, they tell us 15, but we've gotten 20 plus out of them.
And so, you know, we've got several that are that old.
We've got some that are quite a bit older than that.
And they, you know, they get to a point where, you know, parts get rusty, they're not safe, maybe, slides are, what park was it that had the slide problem?
Vandalized.
We just did one at Northern Boundaries last year.
Yeah, that was the one where they
was
came
cracked
across
and-
pictures of the kids getting hurt, so.
So I'm thinking that, you know, it's just like the mayor said, to have a nice plan, I think it was the mayor, maybe it was Randy.
I think we both said something along the same
You buy a
lines.
vehicle, and you plan a certain life expectancy, you budget, you know, 10 years out or whatever it is to replace that vehicle. So I feel like we've kind of hit a point where we've got several playgrounds that are in need of replacement, updating, and we can do one a year. So,
And you know, that begs another question too, and it would take some hard decisions to make, but are there parks that still need to be continued to have a playground based on their use? That's something we'd have to evaluate and make that determination, but I think there's a couple that, probably the demographics of those neighborhoods have changed so much that, there's very little use for those facilities there. But that's a hard decision to make too.
Yeah, that was going to be my comment, because I go to a lot of these parks. I walk our dog through parks a lot, and rarely do I see people using the pavilions. Once in a while, the playgrounds, but usually it's one or two children. It's not a whole group of children. So they're not, for the price that we pay, do we need as many as you think we need? Maybe a little inconvenience will make people appreciate the playground a little bit more, of just having to drive a mile or two further to go get to one.
And I think to Suzanne's point too, is that although we classify certain parks that we have as neighborhood parks, they're only neighborhood parks to people that live within about 1,000 feet of them. Most people drive to our parks. There's not a lot of people that walk unless you kind of live across the street or within a short block or two. And
Some of our parks are on busy roads, like
Yeah.
off of Wild Rice Drive, there's no parking area at that park, so you have to either park on the street or park somewhere else and walk across Wild Rice Drive to get to the park.
We built a parking lot there.
Yeah, they built the parking lot this year.
I know, but it still looks like there's a cage in the front, that's not a very attractive park, and you can't see it until you're right
Yeah.
on it. I mean, we have
Yeah.
to sign that park definitely better so they know there's a park there, but it is not the most, user-friendly park.
It doesn't get a lot of use. We did put some, those brown signs on the road too to show you that there's a park there. You fly right by that one without even seeing it before.
It's being used by snowmobiles right now, so.
That's most of our parks. So we got two big funding issues. We have to keep upkeep on what we have, and then we look at improving facilities and adding facilities. So these two budgets are kind of broken down into those different items too. So for 2020, we have Evelyn Park and Carlisle Park. Those are really old playground equipment. Those are scheduled for replacement this year at a cost of around $25,000. That's just for the structure itself. We try and reuse all the edging and stuff that we can in the park. The big ones we're gonna have coming up, Booster West Playground. That park gets more use than all of our parks combined, probably by a magnitude of 5 or 10. There's people there all day long.
I can
That-
attest to that.
That one's $125,000. We might look at, maybe you want to spend a little bit more on that one. That's kind of our flagship park. All of our athletic teams are here at that park.
But is that kind of going along the lines of what Jack was talking about, which is instead of replacing maybe one of these parks that is not very well used and just say, okay, we're just gonna pull that park from our playground and just concentrate on putting a very nice one in Booster.
So what is wrong with Booster that you're thinking that it needs to be replaced? Because I go up there quite a bit, and I take kids there sometimes, and it looks nice to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of broken parts on there that we can't get parts for anymore. It's getting pretty run down.
When was
The
it,
main structure itself.
when was that installed?
I don't know, that
I
was,
think that was when I first started on the Parks Commission, so that would have been like 12 years ago.
no, it was earlier, it was prior to 2006.
Okay.
We'd have to go back and look.
Well, I
and see.
remember, yeah, I remember when, when we replaced it last time, so.
I wonder if there's a way that we could get that updated, and, I don't know if it would have to be a book like this or something, just to have an idea of how old the equipment is, just to help us with planning. And I don't know if there's a way to measure usage or surveys or whatever are always difficult, but at least if we had a, this book is, 2007, I don't know if there's a more recent one that was done.
that was part of the comp plan. They hired a consulting firm to do that, so the city spent quite a bit of money
Say, Nate, I was gonna ask in this park capital fund, I don't see anything with any ball lights over at the new ball fields. Is that kind of something that's way down the list now, or?
That's,
Okay, because I mean, I think there's some financial opportunities for the city to make some money there, because I've talked to coaches and said that them fields would be rented solid for the summer.
We could get a lot more tournaments.
Yes,
yep, and that, put that in 2023 to kind of gauge and see how much use the baseball field gets, and then look at what the
Yeah.
demand is at that time.
yeah, because there's one this year, I mean, I think you guys okayed, they were talking about a state tournament here this year it could be like close to 60, 80 teams playing or something, so that could be a big thing for the city.
So that line item in the orange, the Booster West ball field lights, is that for the existing fourplex?
That was for the existing baseball field.
Baseball field? So you're talking about tournaments on the fourplex though?
Well,
These
all
are, this
four
is just,
fields right around the concession area there,
Yeah, you could.
you know, if you could
do
light
it all
them,
at once.
I know it's
It'd be
expensive,
more
but,
than that though,
yeah,
quite a bit more.
right.
I'm just trying to clarify,
Right.
that line item
That'd be
is for the new
The
baseball field,
new
right?
baseball field.
Okay.
And part of the reason for that is for teams that play on the regulation baseball field, they play longer games and they can't get them in the evenings without lights as the nights get earlier in the season. Like our town team, or the Bandits town team can't play on that field unless it's a weekend.
Right, because they don't start till 7 o'clock,
Correct.
so, yeah.
No, I'm not saying right now, I'm just saying down the road, you know,
Right.
those other fields, that, like I said, I think it'd be a hit. I think there's a chance for more money for the Parks Commission and a lot more teams coming in here. It's
Well,
just-
it's gonna be a lot higher cost than
Right,
130,000.
I understand that, but
A lot
that's, you
higher.
know, that's,
So,
Nate, did you have some information on projected rentals for that baseball field for this year?
Sorterville, Blaine Athletic Association has rented the baseball field out every night for the summer.
The full-size field?
The full-size field.
I
yeah.
expect that, yeah.
And then our other 8 fields are rented out every night for the entire summer as well, so there'll be at least 9 games going on or practices going on out there at just about every night this year, if they show up when they have them scheduled.
So assuming that's the case, what would be the projected income from that be?
The field rental fees are $25 or $20 a piece for the fourplex on the baseball field a night. And the other 4 that aren't irrigated are free for the local teams. It's not a huge income, it basically just covers the cost for us to maintain it, is what those fees were set at. Trying to keep the cost down for the kids to be on them, I guess, was kind of the idea with that.
Well, I think the good thing on that line item is, you know, it's 3 years out yet, and we'll have a couple years of track history of how the full-size field gets used. That always helps making decisions right there, so.
That seems really reasonable. I know to rent a pavilion in Champlain or Maple Grove, it's like $150 to $300. That's just a pavilion for a couple of hours.
They have electricity.
Some do. The one, yes.
I think it's been, the city's policy is, you know, we want to try to cover what our basic maintenance costs are.
Oh, I understand that.
Because if we charge higher fees, we may be able to get them, but then these are passed down to the kids that play, which has a chance to diminish maybe some of their participation and reduce revenues in the future. You know, part of this with these sports programs is it's so expensive for kids to participate in anything, and I think the goal here is hopefully to get as many kids out as possible and make it as reasonable as possible for them to play these sports.
Yeah, I wasn't saying to raise the price, I'm just surprised at how reasonable it is, that's all.
is that the same price for tournaments, Nate, as far as field rental?
Tournaments have a different fee, they pay $300 for the weekend,
Okay,
and then there's some additional fees if they want to use the concession stand,
okay,
things like that.
okay.
One other thing we'd have to do if we have a lighted field, we'd have to look at a little different fee schedule for that to cover the extra added cost of the electricity.
Have we ever looked at,
I have not looked into those, no.
There are, but they would be very, very expensive.
Are they? Well, I was just curious.
Yeah.
'Cause then we could just, I guess they're too expensive.
This is our form for rental. So our pavilions are $50 if you're not a resident. If you're a resident, they're free. The community center is the same, Whispering Aspen. That gets quite a use, just about every weekend we've got people renting that out. $20 for the 4 fields and the baseball field a night. I guess it's $3.50 for a tournament, Tim, for the fourplex. Concession stand rental. It's also a $300 fee for the concession stand on a tournament, so.
How often are the pavilions rented?
Just about every weekend in the summer, one of the 4 is at least, sometimes 2 or 3 of them are. At Booster, yeah. John Anderson gets a lot of rentals too. That's a really nice park and pavilion up there. So.
So where are we going from here?
Anybody have anything else? Starting with our next meeting, we'll start doing our capital improvement planning. We'll have to readjust everything after we've made all those changes in Northland Manor. It sounds like there's some support for trying to get the baton segment done maybe this year. We can talk about that at the next meeting and maybe get that to city council for approval. I can have Craig give me a lot better estimate on what it's gonna cost. With those other 2 trails on hold, it might be something we can knock out this year and just do it all at once rather than do a segment at a time. Might get some savings if we do it all at once with the contractor.
Hey, is the Northland Trail on hold, the one that connects to Viking Preserve? The boardwalk?
My recommendation would be to put that one on hold, maybe until we see some development on that corner. The whole point of that trail was to connect the residents so they could walk up to a grocery store or whatever takes place
So
there.
have we acquired all the easement?
We have everything in
right-of-ways?
place, we can always go back.
And that's the
tackle that
hardest
later.
part, is getting that, and ultimately the most expensive part is sometimes getting that right away too,
Let me
so.
just show something here, Nate. Up on Fish Lake, these white segments here are a system of boardwalks that the city built in 2008. It's approximately 1,000 feet, and the materials cost for that was close to $60,000. So boardwalks are very expensive.
Yeah, that's because that's all the Trek stuff too, it's
Yeah.
all the,
Yeah, and then you have to buy the plastic floats, you have to buy all the special fittings, the big pad footings, if you're gonna go in places where you don't have any water that rises, so everything's real expensive, but the city did build one section of boardwalk, we did that in-house, but, the materials were bid out and purchased through Lowe's, and then we had specialty products for floats, and, steel footing products that were bought from Smith Iron Works, and it was a fairly extensive project. The one for Northland Manor is just a little bit longer than this. I think it's about 1,200 feet, but it also includes a stream crossing of Crooked Brook, which we're gonna have to get Corps of Engineers permits to do, and they're saying right now that instead of using a culvert there, that they'd probably require some type of a footbridge, which would be rather expensive too, because it would have to be above the 100-year floodplain.
I thought we had a couple crossings with this one.
We have water crossings, you can see right here.
Yeah.
There's water there most of the time, but what we've done there, and we worked with the Anoka County Parks Commission with Karen Blasco. They have one like this, over in, what's the park? Bunker Park. And what we do, we have plastic floats here,
Okay,
go up and down with the water level, because sometimes it dries
Mhm.
up, sometimes it gets high, so there's no bridges there, but everything on these are on plastic floats that are movable with the water level.
Jack, when was this put in?
2008,
So it's been in for 11 years?
yeah.
how is it held up?
That's my next question.
It's in fairly decent shape. We do have some pretty significant stuff we gotta work on it. That's just,
When I was on it a couple months ago, my impression was it's in pretty decent shape, so.
yeah, there's a couple spots that are kinda rotted out, but
It is a higher maintenance item, but, you know, it's gonna have some replacement of boards, adjustments to if some of the floats get broken. They would need to be replaced. It's a lot higher maintenance than just a paved or a natural surface trail.
So, but it was made out of wood, right?
Correct, it's treated wood.
Green treat lumber and the plastic floats. We wouldn't be able to use floats to cross Crooked Brook because the
No.
water's moving too fast through there, so we'd have to have something that was, like Jack said, above the floodplain on that portion.
Can you use composite for that?
The tracks?
I don't see why
Yeah.
you couldn't.
It's more
Because
expensive.
that would be more
Well,
durable.
part of it
would
is,
not?
right?
Yeah.
The decking's tracks.
No, the decking's treated wood.
If you get a chance to, Anoka County and City of Andover have put one in along Crosstown Boulevard where it comes to Bunker Lake Boulevard by their fire station there. They just did that one last year. That one's a pretty nice design too. It's on galvanized footings that are screwed into the ground, so it's actually held up in the air. That'd be another option.
Is that what they have at Springbrook Nature Center?
I haven't been there.
When I was there last summer, they have a metal boardwalk.
Okay, it probably is the same kind of concept then. So.
So I think perhaps in closing, one thing that I'll add, and it's kind of tailing on what Randy said earlier, is the option of consolidating some parks. And the, way I've always looked at it is, Suzanne, your neighborhood, the park in your neighborhood, I remember when that was built, and that entire development grew up almost at once. All those homes came in pretty much within a year or two. And the amount of use of that park was pretty high. And I remember that because we lived in that trapezoid you drove, had on a map where there was no parks on. So we had to drive the parks, and that was one of the parks we went to a lot. And that got a lot of use
It still does.
20 some years ago. But even more so. There's dozens of kids there at a time. But I think as these neighborhoods get older, just the demographics change, and so you don't have quite the demand on neighborhoods.
Whispering Oaks.
Whispering Oaks.
One of the things too is the facilities offered by the park. Some of the neighborhood parks where we just got a playground and an open field, and the demographics change, there's nothing there to draw people from further away
Right.
either. So, in terms of what we had a discussion with the Parks Commission back, I believe it was last March, I think we identified there were probably 5 major parks in the city. That would be Booster West, Booster East, John Anderson, Norson Manor, and Whispering Oaks. Those are the major ones that we have. The rest of them were these are kind of neighborhood parks. And those are the ones when the demographics change, you see the use fall off to about 0.
Mm-hmm.
We have one park where we measure the usage of it by the fact that we only empty the trash about twice a year.
Right.
Don't stop home.
Yeah.
We tried that.
Tried that, yeah.
I can tell you, my neighborhood, almost every house is, since I've been there, is sold, and younger families have moved in, so there's still a lot of children. We have daycares, at least 2.
I know even up in Whispering Oaks, but a lot of young families moved in just the last year. You see a lot of young children going to the park there.
Okay. We good?
So I can get a little clarification here. I'm hearing that we have somewhat of a priority for focusing more on our trail system, somewhat of a concern about focusing more investment and improvements in our major parks, and possibly looking at some of our existing parks to see if some proposed items that need to be replaced are actually warranted. Would that be accurate?
And I think to add too on the trails, there's kind of 2 perspectives with the trails. One is you know, kind of the more regional, longer trails to people use to get longer, just had longer spanses. Then what I call a connector trails, or that are connecting neighborhoods, which, you know, the best example we have is the one back here, but we connected Booster East with the neighborhood north of there, and that short, I think a foot per foot, you know, that trail gets used the most of any trail we
I'll
have.
tell you, there's at least 20 people walking through there every morning with their dogs.
Yeah,
As my dog greets all of them.
they have bark collars. But,
He's
you know,
in the house greeting.
so that's kind of my point, you know, when we think about trails, you know, and think about bang for the buck, you know, we can, you know, again, I keep coming back to the trail in your neighborhood. I was connecting those neighborhoods, which is no other way to get between those neighborhoods is to go all the way around 1.5 miles, where you can walk 500-600 feet and get to neighborhoods. So, you know, that's one of my encouragements, is find things like that can be a small investment dollar-wise, but, you know.
I think we have 3 of those connector trails on the list right now. From John Anderson.
John Anderson is the one.
Oak Brook.
So, okay. Well, I think you need to adjourn your meeting.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, council, for listening to us.
Well, thank you very much for being here.
You need the chair for your deal?
Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Oh, I have a bunch. Thanks.
From parks to this.
Item 4.0, discussion of conditional use permit violation and non-conforming uses. Council will be asked to review and discuss enforcement for existing non-conforming properties and properties in non-compliance. Stephanie Hanson, our Community Development Director here, is to review 3 properties that there have been issues with, and we've been working with these owners to come into compliance for a long period of time. She'll review some of the concerns, update you on some of the history and some of the meetings we've had, where we are in the process, and seek council's direction on this matter.
Okay, so how this really came up is I've been here for 6 months now with the city, and I've been approached by at least 2 developers and a number of the East Bethel business owners and some of the residents regarding conditions of some of the businesses within the city, in particular the southern portion of the city, as this is the gateway and entrance to the community. Each individual's voiced concerns about the appearance of the properties and the negative effects they're having on the marketability of the city. Both the developers expressed the concern of the marketability of surrounding lands, both from a residential and commercial aspect. And then also existing business owners have expressed concerns with the perception of the city and how some of these lands are, how they're devaluing their businesses, or just not giving a good overall feel for the city of East Bethel for people to come visit their businesses. So the first one is all appliance disposal, and Jack has it up on the screen. It's this one right here. So I was here when this CUP was originally approved. It was issued back in 2011. The business was proposed as an appliance recycling center in which the appliances would be kept in roll-off containers and all dismantled parts would be kept in the roll-off containers. So a maximum of 20 roll-off containers and 4 railroad piggyback containers were approved to be stored on the site, in which all the recycling would be placed in these containers. So over time, the business has become an all-encompassing recycling facility. Recycled goods and appliances no longer are stored within containers, as presented by the owner, Mr. Friesmuth, and which was approved by City Council. There's numerous recycling piles that are very tall, visible from neighboring properties and Highway 65. So staff has met with Mr. Freemuth to discuss the continued nonconformities with the CUP violations. And to date, Mr. Freemuth has until February 29th to show improvements to the property, clean up the front of the building, and to manage the recycle piles so they're not visible from the right-of-way. Now, back in 2011, the CUP was issued just because there was going to be storage of these containers with all the recycling within the containers. In code back then in 2011 and right now, recycling facilities is specifically prohibited within the city. So recycling facilities like this is shown isn't even a permitted use within the city. Again, the CUP was issued not for the recycling aspect of his job, but just because when he proposed it, he was going to have these containers and these appliances were going to go in these containers and be dismantled in the containers, everything kept in these containers. However, over the years, it looks like this now. So right now, staff seeks City Council direction as how to proceed, as there's been little to no improvements on the site within the last year. The property does continue to remain non-compliant with the approved CUP.
When was the first time you approached him? Or
I
the city?
believe it was a couple years ago, and then I know 1 year ago they've been working with him continuously and tried to improve the property where he hasn't done anything.
This
So
is-
it's been years.
This has been ongoing for at least 4 years. The problem was probably exacerbated here a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, when the tariffs were put in place. So a lot of the market for this stuff is overseas. As a result, Mr. Freemuth probably saw a decrease in price for his materials and started stockpiling a lot of these on site. As Stephanie mentioned before, though, originally when this was approved, all these materials were supposed to have been put in containers, stored in the containers, so when the trucks came to pick it up, they picked the containers off and hauled it off. But the problem's gotten worse in the last year and a half, 2 years.
Do we know whether that approach was ever started of using the roll-offs and the containers? Did the business start doing that?
Yeah, that, in the beginning, I know it was, but I was only here for about that first year of it.
Yeah,
But he did have those out there in the beginning, I know.
okay. Because I've been there a few times and it's crazy that you can even get in there, but it's been that way for several years, so.
And this is one of the biggest properties where we've had a couple of the developers talk to us about it, and then surrounding business owners as well.
Actually, if you look closely at these pictures too, there's one of them, there's started to be quite a large pile of tires there.
Which he wasn't gonna accept at all, right?
Correct.
So compliance-wise, we have a letter out to him that in a few
Correct.
weeks, we're gonna expect to see some improvement?
Yeah,
Did we
so-
lay out the improvement's gonna be, or?
Yes, well, the first step of it was, we did meet with him towards the end of January, I can't remember, end of January. So we gave him until the end of February to at least get those recycling piles down so they're not towering over everything. We don't want to see anything from the street, from the right-of-way neighboring properties. Also, he was supposed to get a certificate of occupancy for inside the building. That was never issued. I know the building official went out there and had stated that it's hazardous inside the building. So the building official's been working with him on that as well. So we told John, the owner, that we would take it in steps as long as he's working with us to bring the property into compliance.
And as long as they continue to make progress, assuming they're gonna make progress, but the next,
We're hoping.
but assume that happens, and then we're just gonna continue to wanna see progress
Correct.
and have it documented.
Yes.
And that's the critical part. In a lot of these instances where we've worked with people, we've seen progress up to a certain point and then it stops. And then some of the past practices revert back to what they were doing prior to our meetings. But when we met with John, and we were very clear, and he was definitely understood where we were coming from, is that we told him, we want to see some significant progress by the 29th in reducing the heights of the piles. And we talked about a timeline and getting this cleaned up and told him 6 months. So we'll monitor that and see what happens.
I would assume ultimately, we want to get in compliance with the CUP, which would be having the containers there and a roll-off.
Everything in the containers. And that's the one thing with him, though, we did speak with him on that, and he is adamant that his CUP does not require him to have his stuff inside of containers.
It's in black and white though, isn't it? It's in the written
In my
document?
opinion.
Okay.
Mhm.
And he signed it?
Yes.
How much of that is his property? I mean, from what we see? I mean, is it just
It goes
all the
from
buildings
this
or?
point all the way back here. It's probably, I'm gonna guess, close to a little over 2 acres.
Yeah.
Correct. And as part of the exterior storage in this area, that only 50% of that rear yard was supposed to be the recycling area. And that was supposed to be just all the piggyback, whatever they're called, containers. And now he has it throughout the entire site as well.
Are they still occupying that house that's in back?
No, the house has never been occupied. He uses that to store materials and other items in.
So that second white building on top and all that stuff is his too? That looks a little bit neater up there?
No, this belongs to George Cassette, who
Okay.
currently leases this to Reliable Truck or whomever, whatever name they're operating under now. But this is John's property, this long, narrow piece here with all the stuff. The property to the south is Central Trailers, to give you some perspective.
Okay, and so the stuff on the, I'm gonna say it's north, but it's probably south, I don't know. But on the north, according to the picture, next, below that bigger white building is, all that junk is his junk too, like along the road there?
Yeah.
Yes, all this is his.
Right along the fence line.
Because I don't see why he would
That's
be
gotta
having
be, that's
stuff
an older
against the
picture,
road.
isn't it?
This picture was done prior,
2017.
yeah, it was done prior to the road improvements we did down there, because you can't see any curbs, so it's at least 2 years, maybe 3
Because
years
last
old.
time I was in there, it was, you had
Yeah.
to go
The-
pretty straight, you couldn't deviate at
Yeah.
all, and you had to back all the way out.
So it's worse than this
I think
now?
so, yeah.
This area in here, putting the cursor resembles this area right here.
Yeah, that narrow driveway pretty much goes the whole way in there now, so.
And that is one thing too, I'm working with the fire chief as well too. He's going to be going out and looking at this property too to make sure that there's adequate road, that they can go back there and turn around with the fire trucks and
Yeah, because Mark said right now, if there's a fire in that house is gonna burn down,
Yeah,
because they
there's-
can't get back there.
Well, and we shouldn't be bringing our equipment in there either. It's, we can trap our equipment in there, so,
Right.
and our
You couldn't
firefighters.
get there even if you wanted to.
You'd have to fight it from Boat World, so.
But the other consideration is too, is, you know, we're not sure how many flammables are in here, and if this thing did catch on fire, it may be one that's very difficult to extinguish.
Well, there's appliances, there's some
Yeah.
flammable stuff
Yeah.
in appliances, but they'll burn.
Yeah.
If a fire gets started, it burns,
It's gonna
so.
go.
I do have a call into Noka County Environmental Services and then also the MPCA to find out if he's up to date on all of his license and such too. So staff right now is just seeking direction. You know, if you're okay with us just continuing forward, if we start to see that there's non-compliant, just bringing it back to city council for another discussion.
Sounds like you have a plan in place right now.
Yep,
Yep, see what happens at the next inspection, so.
okay.
It's gonna be hard to measure, that's kind of there's so much there.
Yeah, and I do know he's going to be cleaning up the front of it too along 65. He has a lot of stuff there and he has some trailers there where people can drop stuff off, but all that's gonna be removed too.
Yeah, that's the biggest complaint I get is the front. You know, he's got trailers full of stuff in front, that's what people are upset about, so.
All right, so we will continue just proactively
Yep. I think we-
hitting
like-
this property and,
Getting that front cleared up first is probably a good thing.
Is this a January through June? You give them 6 months?
1 month.
well,
One?
They gotta see 'em.
he has 1 month to get the piles down, so we're
Yeah.
not seeing them and clean up the front area. And then we'll revisit with him at the end of February and then we'll set the next step for him.
Was there anything mentioned about 6 months?
Yes. When we talked with him, we asked him, in his mind, what a reasonable cleanup date would be. And we had the date in our mind too, and he said 6 months, and that concurs with what
Yeah.
we would like to see this done in the timeframe.
Yeah, and that's why we're working with him too. I don't want it to be to a point where it has been this last year that we give him 6 months and then at the end, we know he's not making progress and then at the end of the 6 months, we're like, well, you haven't done anything.
Yep.
So we just want to continue setting goals for him to,
I think if
To
you have a
meet, so,
schedule of
yeah.
expectations
Mhm.
and
It would seem reasonable if we could get an idea bi-monthly or something. what's
Correct.
happening. I thought I'd heard 6 months, but I thought I had to check my hearing.
We can certainly, we'll certainly give you an update on the progress. And
Yeah.
I think it's important that we all stay abreast on this too, because if there's not significant projects made, or progress made, we'll have to make some other decisions.
Do we have access to a drone? The fire department or anyone have one?
The fire department can actually get the county's drone and the emergency services one and use it on occasion. They use
That'd be
it
the
once.
easiest way to measure that thing.
Well, that
No.
one's not too hard. You can stand on the street and almost
Yeah.
gauge the progress on that one.
even at the drones, it can be hard to
Yeah.
tell what actual progress is. And it's in
That's a
short
lot.
pieces, but
all right, so the next property is the one directly to the south, Reliable Trucking.
Let me turn this. We don't have any good, there's no photography that represents.
Reliable Trucking now that is just shown when it was the boat place. So, in 2018, CUP was issued for this property for truck services, sales, and repairs. Staff has some concerns with this. According to the zoning code, motor vehicle sales are specifically listed as a prohibited use. Also, according to the city code, vehicle repair is allowed when it's only an accessory use to motor vehicle stations, which is defined as a gas station, actually. So approximately, a little bit of a background here, in approximately 2009, Mayor Voss, you may remember this, the CUP was revoked for this exact same property for Nelson Trucking because they were conducting truck services, sales, and repairs out of this site. It was a very messy site, very non-compliant, so that CUP was revoked on that property. The biggest thing with this is that I have businesses and residents asking why they're selling trucks at the property out in front. Again, open sales lots are prohibited use within the city of East Bethel. And then this past fall, Reliable Trucking moved an illegal structure without permits onto the property. It's almost like a construction trailer, construction trailer. So the owner was notified that they had to remove the structure because it wasn't a permanent structure. They never came in for any permitting. And then suddenly an individual came in for an electrical permit for this illegal structure, in which staff did not issue the permit because it's an illegal structure, and we notified them that it needed to be removed. However, since then, we do know the electrical work has been completed within the illegal structure. So at this time, staff seeks direction too from City Council as to just leaving the CUP as is, maybe amending it to require the parking of the vehicles for sale in the back, because according to the CUP, they aren't for sale for just anybody anyways. It's my understanding it's for, specifically for truckers. I don't know how it was read, but it's these vehicles aren't supposed to be out there for sale just for the general public driving by and seeing them for sale. Again, that would be an open lot, sales lot as well, which is prohibited. So staff is just seeking direction as of possibly amending the CUP, and then also just giving you a heads up, there's the illegal structure on there that we're about ready to pursue as well. One thing that, this one's a little bit newer to me too, but I do know that they were doing automotive body work here or painting, which was not allowed as part of the CUP. So that's also happening at this facility.
Have we done a full inspection of this property?
Not since I've been here.
So.
I believe they have before I was here.
Okay. So we're talking about things that we think are going on there and or feel like they're having.
Yes, a letter had been sent out to them about doing automotive repair outside the building. They were doing it in the yard out there and doing auto body painting and that sort of thing. So yes, they received letters about that.
What reason is there that we think they're doing those things?
Because we were told that they were. And you could see them out there doing the repairs and such, and they weren't supposed to be doing any of that out there. It's supposed to be doing all in the buildings.
So that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So the city officially hasn't done an inspection of these things within the
Not
property?
recently. I know letters were sent to them, I believe it was last summer.
Well, letters are sent, was that letters are sent based on inspections? or-
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
okay,
sorry.
okay. So in 2019 there was?
Yes.
Okay. So staff's efforts is to get them in compliance,
Correct.
and have they resisted?
No response.
And did
So
they,
it's-
so they had a deadline, they didn't respond to? the deadline?
Correct, correct. And now this one with the illegal structure, I had Aaron send a letter to them, just giving them a date that it just needs to be removed.
Okay.
Because we do have the documentation that we have spoke with them in the past, that it is an illegal structure. What's required of it, I know the building official spoke with them as well.
Okay.
Well, for that structure, what does it look like? I mean, is it like a shed or a?
No, it's almost like a construction trailer.
That was
That-
made permanent?
Yeah,
So
like the
is-
construction trailers that they have out on construction sites.
So is there a way that they can back up and get approval for it?
No, because it's a temporary structure. They would actually have to build it.
With
Build a new
footings and
structure.
foundation?
Correct.
Just letting the air out of the tires won't do it?
Say, Stephanie, who actually owns that property? I mean, according to this here, it said George still owns that. Does he own that, or does Dave and Brennan Herzog own that, or?
It's my understanding that George still owns it.
He owns it, okay.
George
okay.
owns it, and they lease it from George.
Okay. I mean, have you talked to George about it at all, that, you know,
I'm not sure if they have.
okay.
I'll look into that.
Maybe communicate with the
Well,
owner that they're,
He owns the property,
Actually, let
so-
me
Yeah.
take that back. George owns the property. George leases it to Randy at Boat World, and Randy subleases it to them.
Wow.
It seems to me in years past that we had a policy that when we send out the CUP violations for businesses with tenants, the tenant and the owners.
That's what it had been, should be. The owner should be getting it as well, and I'm not sure what they've been doing.
Okay, okay.
So I'll check into that.
Because I know one instance where we put the pressure on the owner of the property, and they wanted it cleaned up too, so. And in terms of the new business that came in, that took over, was there any obligation on their part to redo the CUP?
No, we didn't even know that they changed hands until recently. But no, the CUP
But should they
goes-
have?
No, because it's the same business as the other one, Reliable Trucking and Universal Trucking. They have the same type of business.
Okay.
didn't we look at this half a year or more ago about the front and the back of the place being not split by ownership, but split for use?
This is one to see.
That was Central Trailer, I think that was.
There was access on the side of the lot to get to the back one.
There's two split lots in this. The All Appliance is a split lot. They own the front lot and the back lot. Where George Cassette owns the property where the Lex building is, that's actually two lots too. There's a lot in the front and a lot in the back. So those are the only two lots in there that are split, with the exception, I think, that back of the Faro Gas property. That's two lots also.
One thing that staff had concerns too with the CUP for the Reliable Trucking was they were given a certain number of trucks that they could sell out in front, and they're well over that, and they have trucks also for sale now back in their yard as well.
I remember having, was it 3 trucks or something they can have out front? It was a small number.
I think it was 9, wasn't it?
No, I don't think it was that big. I thought it was like 4 or 5.
Yeah, that's what I think. It's 5 is
Five,
the
okay.
number I'm thinking of, and they've well exceeded that.
I'm thinking the other one, PBS.
So they're non-compliant in many factors, and they just haven't responded to the latest letter. Is that where we're at with that?
Correct.
And our next step action is a second letter?
We can do a second letter, correct?
Well, we
And
have
just keep, proceeding.
we have a
forward
procedure
with
we
it.
need to follow,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
So it says that the area behind the gate and in front of the building for truck sales, and this will be it will be minimal, maximum 10 vehicles they're allowed to have out there for sale.
When you send those letters, do you CC the owners?
I will have to ask Nick on that, the building official, and Aaron. They are the ones that do the code enforcement. So I'm not sure what their policy has been, and yes, the owners are the ones that should be getting the letter,
The
and I'm not
CC
sure what's been
CC
happening.
gives you multiple attacks. Because it's the owners getting a second letter, identified as a second letter, and that certain action's going to happen, and If you don't get something from somebody, you CC the guy's, the person's boss.
So when you say the owners, are you talking about George Cassette?
Yes, the property owner, it should,
Property owners.
it technically should be going to the property owner with the tenant being CC'd on it.
He might have a bigger
you're
hammer
saying-
than we do.
So you're saying Boat World would not get any notification on this piece?
Well, Boat World is no longer there, are they?
Well,
It's-
they
They're
are-
subleasing though, aren't they?
They're subleasing to Reliable or Universal Truck, so all parties involved.
All
should
parties
Would be,
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
Yeah. So in staff question too on this one is that they do have a lot of the truck sales up on front on Highway 65. Is this something that city council wants to continue having those truck sales out on front? Even though sales of that sort are prohibited in the city, and just keep it behind the gate? Because technically they're not supposed to be there for the public
Well, what did
to see.
CUP say again about selling? I thought the permit allows them to sell
This one does, however, the conditional use permit does, however, it's a prohibited use in the city. So we can't have any open sales lots anyway in the city. For some reason, this one went forward where they were allowed to. So a CUP was actually issued for something that's prohibited in the city. And the condition on it was saying that there can be a maximum of 10 to be sold there. So it must be up in the front of the building. For truck sales, there can be maximum 10.
it. So, based on that CUP, the expectation was that there'd be truck sales as it is right now.
Correct.
Up in front.
Yep.
Your point is that it's in conflict with our ordinance.
It's in conflict with the ordinance, and then also when you read the staff report, it says that the trucks that are for sale there are not for the general public to be buying. And so my question is, if they aren't for the general public to be buying, so it's not per se an open sales lot, then could these be put in the back lot? Because it seems like these are more geared towards customers that are coming there and need new trucks, or are looking for trucks.
Well, but if the CUP doesn't specify,
Yeah. I look at that photo, to me, they look like they're for sale. I can't tell whether they're for sale to me or for sale to some other group.
Right.
So the net effect on the public is that, there are trucks that are for sale. What's it matter who buys them, I guess, is kind of my point.
Yeah, and
So-
nobody,
I just want to finish. So if your point is from an aspect of the city, do we no longer want that to happen? Well, we gave them a CU conditional use permit to do that. I don't think we can,
I think the difference is, and it was my understanding when this was approved, that they take these trucks that are either repossessed or damaged, and they repair them and get them in a sellable or marketable condition. And they contract, or people come to them when these things are brought in and say, this is the one I want, if you can get it fixed up, then I want to buy it. I'd have to check that out to make sure.
I remember that.
That was the
I
impression
remember
that I
that.
got.
Yeah, I still remember
So
that.
it
yeah.
was almost like they were contracting for a sale prior to their reconditioning of the vehicle.
I remember them saying that a lot of times the trucks are already sold by the time,
Yeah.
they get that far. So I remember that.
so, but that was when Universal Trucking, who got the original CUP, is that correct?
No, Reliable got the
Reliable.
original.
Reliable got the
Universal
original.
did.
Reliable was the original, okay, so they were the ones who made the arrangements for the CUP on that property, correct? In our communications, with Universal, have they been given a copy of the CUP?
We have not had any communications with Universal. We just found out that Universal moved in. Reliable moved out and Universal moved in.
I think that
Like
any,
within the last few months.
Yeah.
Like last
Very
month,
recent,
maybe.
okay.
so I think as part of any communication with Universal, I think the first thing that needs to happen is that we need to let them know, or give them a copy of the CUP and let them know, you know, what our differences are as to what they're doing with the property. I don't think we can do anything in discussing, you know, what to do about, you know, correcting the problem until we first inform them what the issue is, because if they're a new tenant, I mean, they can just claim ignorance, right?
Well, yes and no.
No.
Well, no, but I mean, you know,
Well, let me ask this. Do we know that did Reliable completely vacate the property with all their
Yes.
equipment? So it was empty, and then Universal brought in all new stock? Is that,
That I'm not sure.
or did they acquire what was there?
Universal purchased Reliable, it's all the same employees there.
I'm sorry, I missed
It's
that.
all the same employees there.
But the equipment, all the trucks,
Well, I know some of the trucks are no longer there.
Was
They're
it-
on a different site
We
in
run our
East Belleville.
snowplow, we actually have a snowplow down there, getting work done right now.
that's what I'm getting at, was the property completely empty?
No, we didn't even know it changed hands.
See, I don't remember
Yeah,
that.
no.
That's hard to miss.
Yeah.
So, and the reason why I ask is, if they started anew and got to this point, out of compliance is one issue, but they acquired a non-compliant business, basically is what they did.
Correct.
Okay. So I think that plays into how flexible you are in schedule with them too. I mean, you got to cut them a little bit.
As far as the sale of those vehicles, regardless what they look like, if they're allowed to do that, there's nothing to
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of
preclude
my-
anybody from
That's kind of
buying
my
them.
point too.
An owner-operator go in there, I'm gonna get a truck to start any number of things. It's sarcasm. It's no Girl Scouts only.
Well, one thing that we found out too is they don't have their motor vehicle dealer's license as well, so we're working with the state on that too. So that's going to be another issue.
Well, again, I go in and introduce ourselves, say we're a city, here's what's going on, so. And, you know, they may be in for a little bit of a surprise, but.
Yeah.
Or they may not.
Yeah, and that's what I just wanted to come here and talk to you guys about that, because I know in the past that hasn't been happening, and it's something that I would like community development to start pursuing. You know, things like this, and just getting out there and talking with them and trying to clean up some of these properties, so.
And the best way to achieve a lot of this cleanup is not to run somebody out, it's to work with them and
Yeah,
convince them
oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
that they need to take some action, and it's gonna work out better for
I
everybody.
mean, even going back to the appliance, you know, when they came in, it's a good thing to have.
Yeah.
Problem is, they just didn't follow their permit, and now it's not a good thing, so. But they can remedy it, and, you know, if that business operates as intended, and I think it's fine, so. All right,
All right, the last, PVS Auto, which is up on the corner here on 221st and 65.
That's all.
So in 2013, PVS was issued a CUP for the storage of up to 9 trucks and/or semi-trailers. The CUP did not allow for exterior storage on the site. However, exterior storage has been an ongoing issue since the approval of the CUP. There's numerous junk vehicles, there's a lot more than 9 truck semi-trailers, there's storage of fish houses, there's semi and auto repair happening on site when it's actually supposed to be a place where people can just buy parts. All parts were to be sold within a structure, so nothing outside. And then there's also a number of buildings on site that are dilapidated and that will need to be removed. I do know that the fire chief and building official will be soon visiting this site to go through the buildings and deeming some of them unsafe, and they will have to be torn down. So at this time, staff again is just looking for some direction from city council in regards to the non-compliant CUP. At this point, I believe staff has sent them letters in the past. It's something that we'll pursue again, and this is more kind of a heads-up one, that we are gonna start pursuing the CUP, cleaning it up and making sure it's in compliance.
This is one we get constant complaints on from a number.
Yeah, I do too.
And this photograph here is an older photograph. The number of vehicles on this changes daily. There have been times when there have been less than this, but there have been many times when this number has probably been double what you see here. So it's not a static situation, but it's one where they've exceeded their compliance numbers for their CUP, which was 9.
Do you know if this is a lease operation or they own it?
They own it.
They own it. Are you looking in any particular direction?
No, just more of a heads up that this is one that we are starting to pursue now to get it in compliance.
All right.
And that's it for me.
There's one more on the list.
Well, we were gonna talk about Ness, but that's something that we'll discuss at a different date. I do know too that one's been operating there for a number of years. They don't have their vehicle dealer license, and I'm dealing with the state right now on that one.
And for, back to Reliable Universal, you mentioned they don't have a dealer license as well?
Correct.
And that's part of the CUP, that they have to have
Yes,
a dealer license, right?
Yeah, to sell any vehicles, you have to have your license, anything over 5 a year.
All right.
Item 5.0.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Consideration of a city drone purchase. City utilized the service of Cade Imaging in 2017, 2018, and 2019 to produce drone videos of images and development projects in East Bethel. These videos have been used as a marketing tool in our economic development activities. Videos are a powerful and effective means of showcasing and displaying all the positive aspects of our city and are rapidly becoming a major means of communication. Drone videos can provide dramatic views of project and facilities, increase video traffic and video sharing, and provide a spatial perspective that is superior to overhead and oblique aerial and still photographs. The cost of video productions has prompted discussion of the city to purchase their own equipment for this activity. This subject was discussed at the June 17, 2019 EDA meeting, and the EDA, by a vote of 3-1 with 1 abstention, recommended that City Council consider the purchase of a drone for use in production of promotional videos for the city. The cost of the 2019 video was $1,375. For the cost of approximately 2 videos, the city could acquire a professional model drone with a high-quality image and recording capabilities. Use of our equipment would allow us to reduce our costs, control content and editing of recordings, independent of weather and contractor schedules, produce a wider variety of videos for website use, and allow the expansion of our audio-visual capabilities for informational, promotional, and marketing use. Drone usage can be both a present and a real and perceptual problems regarding privacy matters. The benefits of this technology must be balanced with the perceptions relating to intrusive access and surveillance concerns. These matters would need further discussion to address any of the apprehensions regarding this use of the equipment. Should council consider this as an item of interest, policies, protocols, and limits would have to be adopted to regulate the use of this equipment. Our insurance policies would have to be reviewed to ensure the city has appropriate coverage for these activities, and our operators would have to be registered under a public operation registration or comply with FAA guidelines for commercial pilot registration. The cost of the purchase of a drone to suit our needs is estimated to be $2,500 to $3,000. Training and annual maintenance would add an additional cost of approximately $800 to this amount. Based on discussions with the EDA and mention of this at a previous work meeting, staff is seeking direction from City Council as to the interest in pursuing this matter.
If this was a done deal, do we have the capability to add music and edit and
That would be
cut and
part, that would be
splice?
part of the software package that comes with this. The music stuff is a little different. There, I think there's a basic app or package where you can get certain stuff at a nominal cost. Anything over and above what's on their listing would be an extra charge. What we've done before is just use the basic canned stuff that's been offered by the drone operator or contractor.
One thing about this, just my opinion, you can think of one thing or two things you might want to use it for, but there's going to be about 50 that you won't think of right off the bat.
Well, there would be, and even another application of it is in presenting some information to council for work meetings or action items. It's a very valuable production really to convey a lot of information, more so than a still picture and sometimes even more than a write-up, tables or figures. Picture's worth 1,000 words.
Just on tonight's meeting, the Park Commission could probably have used a bunch of videos for this trail discussion or park, playground equipment and things without
And, you
putting
know,
100 miles a day on.
Another thing we've talked about too would be one of the uses of this would be to do certain promotional videos, and one of them would be about our park system. We put it on our website and YouTube. Just another means of selling the city. It has, I think, a lot of value. We've already spent probably over $3,000 for the 3 videos we've currently done. We only have those 3 videos. The person that did the work did a great job, and I'm sure that's the going rate. But if we had our own, then we could do that for a lot less and do a whole lot more for the same cost or less.
So would we have designated staff to be the only ones to operate it?
That would be, we would. There is a drone pilot that works for the sheriff's office that does some freelance work. Might utilize him. But the training of it, we have 3 people that do have experience with drones. 2 of them have direct experience with drones. One of them is an avid remote control radio airplane flyer who's
Right.
built big planes and flies them all over the place. Mrs. Frost has some drones that she uses, and Chad Satrowski with their Public Works Department has a drone that he's used too, and is pretty good. His sister also is a drone pilot. She does that commercially, so I think we have the talent to get those people trained to do what's going to be required.
I'm just thinking
of
more
us.
of a control of the equipment, so,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm shying away from calling it a toy, because that's how I would use it, but, you know, just so there's control over that, so.
So keep it away from you then?
Yeah, well, that, and if you want to buy another drone next week after I fly it my first time, you know, you just do that.
Some of these things are close to dummy proof. You know, if the battery starts wearing out while it's out someplace, it senses that and returns to the base it left from. But the CUP stuff, if she had a 100-foot view that's 3 days old or something, would be much more credible than what we're able to see.
Well,
I think you need to be careful about that though,
Certainly.
because I mean, you know, when I was thinking about this as a project, I almost would prefer that we exclude all using it as an examination tool at all.
No spying.
yeah.
Exactly.
Surveillance, yeah.
It literally, it should be just used for promotional use only, because as soon as you start saying, well, we're gonna take, you know, aerial video of this property, to see whether or not a property is in compliance, you're gonna get everybody in this city up in arms and saying, why are you guys getting a drone? I'm gonna feel like I'm being spied on.
There's very likely an ordinance that says what you
Right, so I mean,
invade somebody's privacy and
when I envision this, it would be literally only for doing promotional videos or, like Jack said, you know, using it to promote our, you know, facilities, which is parks mainly. We could also maybe do some other things that may have to do with, you know, snowplow safety. I mean, you could put up a drone and show
Sure.
what some of our plows are dealing with when
Yeah.
they're out on the road. So, I mean, there's lots of possibilities, but my biggest priority after that would be, I don't want to be using this at all for any corrective action at all, even if we happen to see it while we're making another drone video going over a park and oh gee, look at this property over here. I don't want to do that at all. It would
No.
be, we are just going to ignore that unless we see it firsthand on the ground. That's a different story.
As a body, we've discussed many times that neighborhoods and personal properties and things are neighbor policed, not drone
Yeah,
or
and-
anything.
and that's one thing I'd like to emphasize too, is the discussion on this, or if you decide to go forward, surveillance is not one of the uses that we're
Right.
proposing this for.
So personally, I'm not in favor of it. I think it's a nice thing to have, and I understand that the dollars it would save for the advertising, but I don't think we need to do repeat advertising all the time. I think we haven't budgeted it for it. I think there's potential for abuse, for privacy violations, and I think our city will be up in arms that we are wasting money when we owe so much money.
I understand your point about the promotional part, but I also think that there's probably some practical uses for planning and our facilities and things like that. So there might be some other uses to get, more value of the investment rather than just promotional. Because promotional, we really only will do probably a few times a year. But, as new businesses open, in terms of doing any video of their properties, as long as the property owners are fine with it, even then it's promotional at that stage too. Then I think we're fine. But yeah, the surveillance and I remember I think it was 3 years ago, the sheriff had their drone out at the fire get together in October, and I remember talking, my wife was so amazed how quiet it was. And the deputy goes, yeah, that could be right outside your window and you wouldn't know it. And she just flipped out. It's like, no, I can't believe it could be outside my window. And it could. So there's a little bit of paranoia there. But yeah, I mean, as a public entity, we shouldn't be doing any surveillance. And I agree too. I mean, there's some benefit to doing the code enforcement that way, but I don't think we're going there, so, or should go there.
Well, I think, so, when we were putting together the drone footage for the MinCar Expo, and Jack had arranged for the professional to create the videos in order to use, literally, there was, Jack, maybe a couple days that she had available in order to come up and
3
take that video. And so one of the problems with that, again, like you said, I mean, she did a great job, but you can never control the atmospherics on a particular day, or even 3 days in which you're paying this person to be here to get video. And when we were looking at the video and we were trying to put it together, it was like, oh, good gracious. I mean, the pictures are great, other than the fact that it was a cloudy day.
Yeah.
And it looked dreary, rather than bright and shiny and new. And I think one of the benefits, if the city had control of that system, is to say, okay, we're going to plan for X day to go out and take video for what we want to do. And all of a sudden it rains that day, you can say, okay, we'll reschedule. And you've got the entire year to get those videos, to get the absolute best shots that you possibly can. Not to mention that once you get the drone video together and it comes before council or whatever body is going to be looking at that particular video and say, gee, that's a great shot, but you know what, it would be better if we had it from a different angle, or with different lighting or some other change that would be made, we have the opportunity then to go back and go, let's go back, let's reshoot that. I mean, we can do that. Whereas, you know, we're kind of locked in. My other question is, Jack, we've been talking about doing this video for MinCar for the past 3 years, correct? Now, that's in the budget for the EDA, is it not?
Correct.
So, I mean, unless we tell the EDA that we no longer want to do these promotional videos, I mean, we're going to be spending that $1,300, $1,400, $1,500, whatever it is, in order to do this anyway. So, I mean, that's kind of what's going to be happening. I mean, we've already budgeted this money to be spent, correct?
It is budgeted for 2020,
Out
Okay.
of EDA.
correct.
Okay.
So it's not like we're going to be spending more money that we hadn't planned for. And I think that's important is just to make sure that, you know, we are kind of, you know, saying, okay, this is what it's for. You know, listen, I think that the benefits outweigh the negatives on this one. Again, I think you know, if we are to go forward with this particular project, number one is we have to make sure that we are putting in the proper direction as to how these are going to be used. And that means that we are going to say, you know, this is not going to be used for code enforcement. It's only going to be used for promotional purposes. And then, you know, make sure that we have an open policy with the entire city to say, look, we're going to be flying the drone on this day in this neighborhood at this time. And make sure that that's on the website, and so everybody's aware that it's being done at a particular time, so that there is no, oh, gee, look at that, there's a drone up there, it's the city spying on me. You know, I don't want that to happen at all, ever. So, if we do go forward, we need to make sure that we are putting together a open door policy that is going to be a firm direction as to how that gets used, and really to be coming out of your office, Jack, as to when it gets that those units are, you know, checked out, and who's going to use them, and where they're going to be, you know, flying, and at what times, and so forth. And because again, I think that it's really important that we're open with the entire community.
And that could be, all that would be incorporated. We definitely need a policy of use on this if we go down this road. I guess what I'm asking for now is not to go ahead and authorize the purchase, but to come back to city council with specific cost on specific models or units, what their specifications and capabilities are, so council can analyze this and then decide if we want to go down this road.
So before we're done with this stuff, my comment was, I think, was made before I really thought about it much. You're absolutely correct about spying. That's my error.
Well, I mean, there are, I think, you know, that it is a possibility that maybe some government entities may think about that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't think for us that we want to have that policy.
Right. When they first came out, the article describing them had them as bugs and birds, as far as spying on things. Fly out somebody's window or something.
I'm fine with proceeding.
Yeah. It's already
I
been
think
planned.
as you mentioned, the benefits kind of outweigh some of the drawbacks, and you know, and you can always get to a point where we find out this doesn't work for us. Well, let me make a decision then. But I think in terms of as you laid out, I think it achieves the goals of EDA in terms of making those videos every year. Because that was a little bit frustrating this last time. Well, you know, it wasn't kind of our expectations, but that's what we bought. So this would give it a little more control for that.
This is part of an existing concept plan right now.
Well, you know, that's,
It sounds like, no? With the EDA?
Well, the EDA, we had a discussion at EDA, and EDA approved,
Sure.
thought it was a good idea. And like, you know, they definitely want to keep doing the drone videos, that was for sure, so. So Jack, you're looking for direction on whether to bring us forward to the council as a proposed acquisition.
that's correct, with prices and specifications and capabilities of certain models, so we would have a choice to make if that's the decision we want to go
Okay.
with.
Are you going to include the policies that we're
We have
thinking about doing as
No,
well?
I-
Or would
I-
that be a later date?
No, I think we need to have the sample policy along with that, I think.
Maybe at least the outline
Yeah.
for it.
We have a couple of sample policies already that we can present. It's probably best to look at those and take a look and see if we need to modify them specifically for our purposes.
Okay.
I do not object to that thought.
To take consensus is move forward, so.
Consents as far as me. Would it be worth anybody's time, curiosity? There's a certain altitude these things are limited to. There's a number of conditions.
That's part of certification training.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't, it's like 500 feet, something like, I don't know what the real number is. My son-in-law's goes up over a quarter mile. So what the rules are and what really happens is two different things sometimes.
Well, there's two different sets of rules here. One would be dependent on how we become registered, where it's just a public registration, or the FAA license. The FAA license probably gives you a little bit more altitude, but I'm thinking we're looking at a ceiling limit of 300 to 500 feet on these units. And if the FAA's involved, we would have to be in strict compliance because we don't want to run afoul of their regulations.
Well, I think we should cross that bridge
Yeah.
when we get there.
Yeah. Okay, on to item 6.
All right, item 6 is a continuation, hopefully the last one for the Prairie Pines subdivision. We've gone over the details on this several times, unless you want me to go over some of the background.
I think let's fast forward here.
I just want to go straight to the specifics. I've met with Athens Township several times. City Council said they wanted some prices from Athens on what our cost for participation would be. They gave us one last time. They came back, they took it to their board. Their board had a few changes in it. The first one we did, we presented this at a work meeting last month. Council said they were fine for considering this, and that would be the city's portion of the construction cost does not exceed $44,000 or 21.4% of the project cost, whichever's less. The travel portion of the road is to remain in Athens Township, the south edge of the pavement of 245th to run concurrent with the Anoka Isani County line. The right-of-way clearance to be limited to 16.5 feet from the south edge of the pavement into East Bethel's easement unless additional clearance is required for utility poles or special consideration. City of East Bethel will be responsible for snow plowing 245th Avenue east of 6th Street to the cul-de-sac termination of this segment of 245th and the proposed internal street within the Prairie Pine subdivision. And with the exception of snow plowing described above, Athens Township will continue the maintenance arrangement that is currently in place for 245th Avenue. After this was presented to the Athens board, they came back with 4 other requests they would like to make. And that would be that the City of East Bethel would coordinate the Connexus utility relocation within the city easement. This would be on East Bethel's side, in the city of East Bethel. Our city engineer told me that the cost would be approximately $3,000 to $5,000. That would be the only additional, excuse me, monetary expenditure that we would be asked to make on this. They also requested that the city of East Bethel extend the current non-annexation agreement with Athens Township for additional 10 years. They also requested the city of East Bethel accepts the engineering specifications of Athens Township for the 245th Avenue project with a paved portion of the street meeting 9-ton requirements. And they also wanted the city of East Bethel to agree to the transition of the road width from the end of the pavement, just east of the entrance street to Prairie Pines, to the width of the entrance to the cul-de-sac at the end of the street, and retain this section as an unpaved road with service improvements as provided by the project contractor. And this is an exhibit to play, this will be provided prior to the council meeting, and that was in the, no, that wasn't in the packet. What it basically says is where the pavement ends, the gravel portion of the road will taper down at the end of that cul-de-sac to meet the existing width of the road, which is 14 feet.
Okay.
So, they say they're okay with our $44,000 participation if we would agree to those items in your packet that are exhibited in red. font.
So, I think go one by one. In terms of the Connexus, who is paying for the relocation now?
Connexus would pay for, that would be the Connexus expense to relocate the poles.
And Connexus has agreed to that?
Connexus hasn't, we haven't had any contact with them, but if Connexus doesn't agree to them, there's no project.
Okay. At some point, someone needs to talk to Connexus, because
Well-
we're gonna have all these discussions, and it's gonna go away when they say we don't pay for it, so.
Well, I wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page.
Okay.
Then that would be the next step. So the project is contingent on Connexus's relocation of the poles at their expense.
Is there any issue with natural gas?
Natural gas is on the north side.
It's on the north side, okay,
It's on
okay,
the Athens
okay.
side, so that's the only other utility that
Okay.
has to be considered in there.
And then the second bullet of the it is hard to say,
Yeah.
non-annexation agreement with Athens. So what is existing? How's that go, when's that go
The
through?
existing agreement was approved by the city of East Bethel in 2012. That was part of those negotiations to get Athens to agree to a relocation of the GRE transmission line.
Right,
They agreed to a different route, and one of the conditions was that we wouldn't introduce any annexation of Athens for 25 years. They're
so they
now-
wanna add 10 years
They
onto
want
that.
to add 10
Okay.
years to that. At the time when we were talking about that, that portion of Athens that the city of East Bethel was in comprised the least populous section of Athens and probably about 3,000 acres, which was tax exempt
Yeah.
property.
Yeah,
The population of Athens Township is 2,100 people. It covers approximately 32 square miles. Should the city desire to have any attempts to annex that, it will probably require us to buy 2 more plow trucks, hire 3 more public works person, and another office person, and I just don't see that being an issue that we have any interest in.
yeah.
I wouldn't have any problem recommending the extension of that agreement.
I think that's why we accepted 25 years before. Thoughts?
I don't have a problem with it.
I don't have a problem with it.
Me neither.
I'm still not crazy about the way he's changing the road, but,
Yeah, me either. I'm like, can't you leave the road the way it is? I mean,
right,
it's still gonna affect some homeowners. They're still gonna have to take some trees out of there.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing they said. What'd they say? We don't want them trees, we wanna leave our trees, so that's,
Well, really though, to get, here's the thing. To get the road in there at an adequate travel width to accommodate the traffic, this has the least impact on any East Bethel residents. The other thing that we're faced with is, let's say Mr. Strandland goes ahead and puts Prairie Pines in without any improvements to the street. In 6 years, let's say that's built out and we have 15 residents on there and they come and petition to have the road paved. Now, again, that opens up a legal question. Are we obligated to pave a road that's not in the city of East Bethel? That would have to be answered, but it could put us in a position too, where we find ourselves having to pay for half or all of it.
Yeah.
Now we're only paying for 20% of it.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things that inevitably is gonna happen, and this is probably the least amount of pain to get it done.
And on this one too, there's 4 East Bethel residents that this impacts, or would have impacted with the initial proposal. With this one, it cuts the tree removal in half for the first 2 properties. The second property will be the most impacted. It has a row of trees, it's a screen. The major screen for that property, however, those trees, when you go out there and look at them, they're not in the healthiest conditions. That would be the most severely impacted one. The gentleman that lives at the end of the road, that's gonna remain dirt, so he wouldn't be impacted at all. So, I think in the long run, this is probably in our best interest because it's gonna protect us from potential higher future costs for this, and which could be much more significant than the $44,000.
Now, is he gonna put some kind of trails or or are we gonna end up, there was some kind of a discussion in the beginning that, on his, that he might consider plotting off areas for trails or something like that.
The Bethel City Council wanted trails.
Yeah. I think he said that he would even be open to having an access out of there to tie into a potential trail, but we have, everything bordering that on the East Bethel side is private property. I mean, we'd have to go and acquire property, and the property we'd have to acquire has been subdivided, and we'd have to split, we'd probably have to wind up buying a $60,000 or $80,000 lot.
And that'd be another long boardwalk too,
Yeah.
because that's all wetland too.
Yeah, that's true.
And as far as maintenance, we do the plowing for Prairie Pines, and then we do 245th.
We
You
would
take
do-
care of all
We would
that?
do 245th from 6th Street East to Prairie Pines.
Okay,
And I told them, you know, the way we normally do with Oak Grove and Ham Lake, the first one that gets to that other section.
Does the
plows
whole
it.
thing anyway.
They're in and out, so.
They're already driving it, so.
But when I say, with the exception of the snow plowing, the rest of the maintenance agreement falls back on Athens, so they're gonna be responsible for maintaining a paved road.
The whole road.
Correct.
We just had the Prairie Pine.
That's
Prairie
correct.
Pines part, yeah. All right,
So if that's the direction, then we'll have this on the next council agenda, if that's your wish.
Sounds good to me.
we're gonna do that before we talk to Conexus, or we're gonna get an answer from Conexus?
Oh, yeah.
We'll put it on there and the issue, it'll be conditioned on Conexus
Okay.
doing.
Or is it just, or do we've got an upper limit anyway?
Yeah, 44
Yeah,
plus
so
whatever that was.
Conexus can be part of that as long as it's
Yeah.
up to 44, okay, all right. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of our agenda.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion made and second, any discussion? Hearing none to the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes, our work meeting's adjourned. Thank you for